Can't believe I forgot to make a video about this. So, a long time ago, and for over the years, a lot of people have often asked the question, why is it that Lance, the same Lance you're thinking of in Pokemon, where he's the champion in Gen 2, and he's also he was the last Elite Four member before the Arrival came in and beat him. So, maybe Lance at one point was the champion, and then they just decided that, the very first champion they had was your rival. So basically, or, whoever was the champion before Red came in and annihilated him. But anyways, so let's talk about Lance. So in Generation 1, okay, because Generation 2 takes place a couple years after, or even if you want to go by the prototype standards, maybe it wasn't necessarily 3 years still. Maybe it was a little bit, maybe it could have been even a little bit shorter or even a little longer after that time period. I'd have to double check. But I don't think it takes place immediately after, though. It's like somewhere between like 2 or 3 years still. But anyways, so let's say that Lance was still the champion of the Elite Four, or at least one of the strongest trainers in the game. You might remember in Generation 1, he had a Dragonite, 2 Dragonaires, a Dratini, or no, wait, no, 2 Dragonaires, a Dragonite, a Gyarados, and a Aerodactyl. But what's really interesting, though, is this was never supposed to be the case, though. He was actually supposed to have, instead of 2 Dragonaires, he was supposed to have a Dratini, a Beluga, and a Cryothin, which are water-type dragon types, which, again, Generation 1 prototype. And then they scrapped the idea, and then they basically gave him 3 Dragonites. But this is what we're going to talk about, though. Why is it that in Gen 2, he's got 3 Dragonites that are on level 55, under level 55. All 3 of them are. And I can explain why. Because at one point, though, he was actually supposed to be even stronger. Think of it like this. So when Gen 2 came out, let's assume that even if the prototype data was just a tad bit different than its final release version, they moved some things around, with the idea that the Elite Four would still be the strongest trainers in the region, and because we're still talking Kanto region is where the Johto region is, well, I mean, at least in this case, they just didn't expand it until a little bit later. So the same Elite Four is still, I mean, it's a little bit different in the prototype, but the idea is that the Elite Four was a little bit different, but the victory road leading up to it and the idea that you'd still fight the Elite Four was still, like, they're the strongest trainers in the region, was still there. So Lance was still the champion at one point, and Red was, well, he was the 8th gym leader in the prototype. Again, before Satoru Iwata, again, the president of HAL at the time, before he became the president of Nintendo, before he passed away, and I don't know who the current president of Nintendo of Japan is right now, but you see what I'm saying, though. Basically, he wrote a compression algorithm. This amazing guy came along and, basically made it more possible that they could rework the whole games. So they basically reworked a lot of stuff, or basically overhauled the whole project, but the same concept was, the same story, but some changes, but, like, they still kept to it that, Gen 2 was going to be what they wanted it to be ultimately in the end. So Lance, one of those ideas was Lance was still the champion because Red was no longer there, because he didn't want to just be somebody who stood in a, taking challenges from people. He wanted to still go out and adventure out, and then you found out that, he still would take challenges, but, like, he's going to do it, like, somewhere else, though. He's going to be traveling, seeing what's out there. And, Mount Silver, hence that's where him and Ethan fight, or Gold. Yeah, I gotta double check. I think it's either Gold or Ethan that challenges him. Whatever, reincarnated version of him. But anyways, so you have this idea that, Lance was a little bit stronger, because at the time it was just that one region, with the Kanto region having all the small details in it. So Lance was supposed to be like, he was supposed to have like level 60s. So his Pokemon were not only stronger, he still had the same team in the final version, but now he had a Charizard. And here's another play on words. Why is Charizard a dragon type? If you go back to Gen 1, it wasn't necessarily a dragon type, but it was made like it was supposed to be a dragon type. Hence, that's why it wasn't a physical dragon type, but it was, you know, it was supposed to be a Pokemon that looked like a dragon. So it's kind of understandable. Maybe Lance was supposed to have a dragon at some. Maybe Charizard was supposed to be a dragon type at one point. Because it's kind of hilarious, because even though this isn't 100% true, but at the same time it kind of is. Why is it that was it Charmeleon that could learn Dragon Rage at one point and still could? Some people, they kept that concept, and then it started learning moves like Dragon Claw and the later versions and all that. You know what I mean? Why was Charizard able to learn Dragon type moves? Because at one point it was a dragon, not a pure blooded Dragon type. Maybe they changed that concept, but it, you know, basically could fight like a dragon though. So that's pretty interesting. Although it's still flying and a fire type. So rock types ×4, you take out Charizard very easily. Hell, or even Surf. You know, Charizard's physical stats aren't really that high, but Lance's Charizard doesn't stand a chance against water type moves. So you could easily, again, get a Lapras. Easiest way to handle Lance is just with ice type moves. You know, guaranteed. ×4 ice, you get his Dragonites out of there and wipe the floor with him and a water type. His Aerodactyl goes down really fast with water type moves, especially since its special defense, I believe, is terrible. Could be wrong though. Its speed makes up for it though, but it's, you know, you got a fast Pokemon, you could easily take him out. But anyways, I think, I'm trying to remember though, but that explains why Lance like had strong Pokemon. Like they were supposed to be even stronger, because at one point the game was completely, well, not completely different, but at that point they just figured, well, Lance is going to be like the last trainer you fight, or one of the last trainers you fight. So it only made sense that, you know, his Pokemon would be in like the level 60s. And I kind of like that concept a little bit more, because they really should have kept the Elite Four in like the level 60s, because by the time you even get there, like your Pokemon should be like strong enough though, you know, strong enough that the, like, guaranteed granted they did lower the levels a lot, because of the different because, you know, when you go into Kanto, you know, and then you start fighting level 50s and 60s, and, you know, and then eventually it goes up to level 70s and 80s, like, once you hit red, you know, that's when it really jumps up, you know, and especially in the remakes where, you know, he's almost, like, his team's almost on level 100, you have, like, a level 88 Pikachu, then he's got Lapras, I think he traded his Lapras over Espeon, then he still has Snorlax, and then he had the 3 Kanto starters. Blastoise, Charizard, and Venusaur. Very interesting indeed. So you see, like, what he decided to do. And if I remember correctly, I think even out of the 3 starters, wasn't Charmander supposed to be the hardest one to raise? I mean, not based on experience, but, you know, based on the type advantages. So for him to go with Charizard and over like something like Blastoise and Venusaur or Bulbasaur, you know, you can really see just how different that setup was, you know. So you really see what a big difference that made. Like, so like if I remember correctly, even in the manga of Pokemon Origins, in the mangas at least, I don't know about the anime, but we know that Green took Blastoise, he took Squirtle, because Red took Charmander, and then he left Bulbasaur with Professor Oak, so Professor Oak took care of the very last one. And so I think that's pretty cool, actually. You see what a difference that makes. I mean, you know. So you can kind of see why why Lance could very well be like as strong as he was, and he only got stronger because he was supposed to be, even though there's people that have beat him, you know, Lance was still one of the more powerful champions in the entire series. And I'll tell you what, you know, if they never would have scrapped some of the ideas in Generation 1, I do think Lance would have been even harder in some aspects. Like some of the dragon type moves, there's only one of them I was able to find so far, but there's this move that Dragonite would learn called not just Hyper Beam, but it was called Mega Fire. Again, if you're a Final Fantasy fan, you can definitely see where they got the idea from this. I can totally see them getting this from Final Fantasy 1 and onwards. You know, you might remember the Dragon Lord, Bahamut. Again, the Lord of the Dragons. So Lord Bahamut, like every time you summon him, one of his special moves was Mega Flare. You know, roast the enemies. And again, one of the more powerful summons in Final Fantasy. Usually, like in Final Fantasy IV, very good example. You could easily kill everything. Overpowered. Even in Final Fantasy V, he was easy. You just cast, or even in 4, you know, you cast Reflect on yourself and he just kills himself. It's like one of the easier bosses. You don't have to. It'd be like Luigi. Like if you remember Mario Party, it'd be like Luigi wins by doing absolutely nothing. If everybody remembers that running joke, you know how to beat one of the more powerful summons in the game by him literally beating himself. It's actually quite interesting how they made that. So yeah, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if Game Freak really would have kept some of the things that they did over time, how much easier the series would have been, but at the same time, how much more difficult it would have been. Because it's like, you know, in exchange for like level grinding more and, you know, fighting like stronger opponents, because, you know, the higher experience you get, you know, the faster your Pokemon levels up, depending on what I think 5 EXP groups. There's the very slow, the slow, the middle, the fast, and the very fast, you know. So like legendary Pokemon are like the hardest ones to raise a Pokemon for. I think with the exception of Mew. Mew's like the fastest EXP growing legendary, but Mew's hard to get though, so you can kind of see where that goes. But the idea was that Mew is a very fast learner. That's why it's able to do what it does. So anyways, you know, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. I think, like, not only that, but there's certain things that they could have also changed over time too, such as maybe Giovanni actually was present in Generation 2, and maybe he was supposed to be, like, not just there in the Elite Four, but, like, at the same time, he was supposed to be a lot stronger than what we initially thought. You know, it's interesting to think like how much different the series really would have been over the time. Like again, it still makes me wonder, you know, what other ideas do we not know that they scrapped that we still haven't answered yet? That maybe the answers are right in front of us, you know? Because I think Game Freak did a really good job with it. Like, because they did use a lot of the same ideas they had, you basically, like, the pattern's there, but filling in the rest of it though, we just need the rest of the facts. But we can definitely see, like, you know, if we have more information to go off of, it's very easy to figure out what they were going for. So yeah, like it makes sense, you know. However many years, I mean, I know it's 3 years, like in the final version of Pokemon, but I don't know if that was still the case with the original Generation 1 and 2, because when the prototype of Gen 2 came out, keep in mind, some of the things that were different was, like, your rival wasn't really Giovanni's son at that point. So while that is a big difference as far as the story goes, but he was, you know, his personality was, he was still a trainer, yes, and he still was one of your rivals, but, you know, his backstory was a little bit different, and therefore his attitude was a little bit different. And so, you know, he's still, like, there's even that one part where, like, you know, you before you fight him, you know, he actually mentions how he actually took on fighting Lance. And he just literally beat him. Like, he couldn't understand why. And so he starts going off saying, like, you know, maybe he's just got to train better because Lance was already a very strong trainer. And that's also what's really cool about Lance is, like, you know, he took dragon type moves, just pure dragon types, as well as rock types, like Aerodactyl in this case, and a flying type or a fire type. Gyarados was a water type. But, you know, he had, like, all these different dragon-like monsters that just really hard, really pain in the ass to catch, like, and you see just like how ridiculous, like, you know, how he became one of the strongest trainers of all time without even, I mean, you know, there's no doubt that he could catch legendary Pokemon, but, you know, he didn't need legendary Pokemon because he already had like the next best thing. You know, he was still like a strong trainer that only how many people can say that you have to beat him, you know? Like the story behind Lance, and, like, you know, even if, like, you know, again, like the whole Pokemon magic thing I mentioned before, where, like, you know, it makes you think about the adventure and the hardships and the ordeals. I mean, imagine somebody who was realistically a trainer. You know, you're doing all this stuff in your own way, and people have their own stories. How many people realistically, if Pokemon was real, could actually beat Lance with the amount of hardships he surpassed? You know, I do honestly feel like, you know, what Game Freak should do is that, you know, like, you know, kind of like the other stories of the characters, I would really love to see a side series of like where every single main character has like a story arc of their very own. Like we can learn about like when Professor Oak was a kid and like him and Agatha, for example, again the original Elite Four. You know how she mentions like she used to know Professor Oak. You know, kind of reminds me of like I was going through like, you know, I remember in Fire Red and Leaf Green, for example, like the frame checker. You know, that one item that your rival gives you after you beat him in Cerulean City for the second time. The second time you fight him. Third time. Not the optional one before the Indigo Plateau when you have no badges. Third time though. So you fight him, and then he talks about how, you know, he just already caught like 40 something Pokemon. And what's even crazier was you really got to ask yourself, like, you know, when he gives you that frame checker and you start going around talking to people, like, you know, it records all like certain things about certain people, like Professor Oak, Agatha, Lance, Bruno, Lorelei. You know, like we know certain things about certain trainers that otherwise we wouldn't have known anyways. Like Lorelei was a nice trainer. She grew up on Island 4, I believe, in the Sevi Islands, the 7 Islands, basically, which again, if you didn't know, was also supposed to be in the Gen 1 prototype, sort of. Like there were prototype maps sort of inspired by it that they later put in there later on. You know, it kind of makes sense. But then you start getting into the whole idea of like, why is it that there's certain islands in the Kanto region that take a lot after that seem like they're more Johto region like, even though they're actually in the same area. You know what I mean? So, but again, the answer to that was because Kanto and Johto are basically the same thing, but their contents are split up culture differences that have been exchanging cultures over time. So again, like I'll give you an example, because like the first 4 generations of Pokemon are basically like all the way up into the Sinnoh region. We're all based on areas in Japan. The Johto, the Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, and Sinnoh. We're all based on like 4 regions in Japan. And depending on what areas that is, because again, you really got to dig into it a little bit. But once you come to that realization, you can kind of see where they got the realism of it, you know, because again, because the idea about Satoshi Tajiri, he did state one of the major golden rules was they had to, a lot of it had to make sense, and because there's realism applied to it, so that's kind of where they got the idea. I know for a fact that it's like even One Piece, the Japanese anime, sort of did the same thing. Like every time they go to like a new area in the world, you want to know why One Piece has been going on for so many years, why, you know, where they get the idea from, because depending on the areas they go to are actually based on areas in real life. See, a lot of One Piece fans don't know this. I mean, even though it's still fantasy and they throw a lot of Japanese stuff in it, you know, but basically that's kind of something that's really interesting. A lot of the concepts come from real life locations, and then they just throw their own version of it in there. And I did not know that, but you know, but it kind of makes sense, because the idea is that like if you're a pirate traveling, you're doing it not just for the love of adventure, but you're also doing it because you never know where life's going to take you, you know, aside from the people that you're constantly getting involved with. It's the same thing with Pokemon, but you know, instead of being a pirate though, you know, you're a trainer who's going on an adventure, trying to see the world around them, you know, learn things about your culture, learn things about the people, the history, what life itself is, and make new friends along the way, you know? So, and then you come across like people like Giovanni, who, you know, he's like this, you know, he's in it for his own reasons. You know, he went on his own adventure trying to run a business by also getting involved with scaring people and taking advantage because he wanted to be powerful. But then, you know, he was done in by Red and some of the others, and so he couldn't believe it when he found out that it's like, oh my God, you know, he's like, how does a kid stand in the way of this corrupt man that even like people like the police couldn't even stop him? You know, it's crazy, it really is. Or even like, you remember when Lance gets involved with like, if you remember, like before they hijack the radio tower, there's that one in the 7th town by Dragon Rage, or Lake of Rage, sorry. You notice that, you know, it's like, you know, Lance is you're teaming up with Lance. like without, you know, just trying to destroy like everything the Rockets are trying to get their hands on, lay waste to their plans and make them back off. How to break Team Rocket up, or whatever criminal organization, you know, was getting involved at that time. But Lance, like Pokemon trainers like Lance and let's see here, Bruno, Lorelei, and Agatha, and even all the other gym leaders. Like, I mean, even like I'll go back to another Pokemon hack, like Pokemon Hyper Emerald, for example. They took like all the trainers that were like throughout the whole series, whether it was the anime, the games, and they just threw them into this hack, and they gave like their own story and all that. And I mean, there were some other characters in there too that was just non-related, because, you know, it's a video game. But it's like, you know, that's what we need more games of. We need more options, customization, and just overall like crossovers, you know, because it's like you never, you know, because it makes you want to like explore every area. What are you gonna find, and where are you gonna find it? You just don't know. So therefore, it makes you really wonder, you know, what can we do with all that information? Because, you know, with that being said, it really does make you want to, you know, make your own games to some degree, you know, because if you have a lot of customizations, you could add something to it that most people don't even know about, or maybe even inspire something else that even the creators themselves didn't even know about. You know, again, anything's possible, but what are you willing to do about it? Because again, somewhere in those prototype maps, there's going to be something in there that could change the way we look at Pokemon, that maybe somebody right now, if they're willing to make a hack of a game, they'd be like, you know what, this is a good idea. And then they go ahead and do it. So I really honestly think that as of right now, depending on how we, you know, the more prototype maps that we get, and the more data we can decrypt and all that, you know, the better it becomes, because then it really shows you, you can really prove those people wrong that they say that, you know, Pokemon really has lost its touch over the years. Because, I mean, a lot of people seem to forget what Pokemon was even about to some degree, you know. But again, we're not going to jump into this, you know, because again, everybody sees things differently, and that'll never change. So, but again, the way I look at it, you know, we should address the problem, and we should fix it with whether even if it's not Game Freak that fixes it. Maybe somebody makes a hack of another game. You know, that would be even better. I think it'd be pretty cool. You know, maybe we can really show people what they can do with a lot of these ideas, and it usually starts by, you know, maybe just customizations and people writing their own arcs that actually, you know, kind of relatable to the characters that we've seen. You know, maybe we can make a side series where every single character that's been in Pokemon, we can write even more stories about them, like when they were kids, or what happened to them next, like Giovanni, or you know, Lance, and what was another one? Like we could see what Bruno goes through, or some of the Pokemon trainers I've always wanted to know more about was like between Agatha and Professor Oak, you know, because obviously they know each other very well. But at the same time, though, you know, we could definitely say that, you know, maybe there's something that, I mean, as smart as Professor Oak is, because, you know, obviously he knows a lot, but, you know, someone as powerful as Agatha in the Elite Four, you know, how much does she know? Because she's been around for a while. Is it possible she could have been an assistant of Professor Oak's at one point? Now you see most people, now right there, that would be something that most people probably don't know, if that is true. You know, or someone like Lorelei grows up in the Sevi Islands. Why is she an Ice-type gym leader? You know, she has a son named Will, who would later take her place in the Elite Four. And, you know, kind of shares the same attitude as her mother. You know, like when she loses to Red, she's like, you know, like amazed that, you know, somebody could even surpass, like someone she's never even seen before could surpass her just like that. You know, because she described it, like, you know, she was overwhelmed that somebody could be that good. You know, or even like someone like Will, like if you remember Will from like when Ethan fights Will in the Elite Four and beats him, you know, he's like literally speechless. Like he says, I think it was like something along the lines like, I can't believe this. Like, you know, like he lost, but not just lost, but he lost like to a really strong trainer. And, you know, even Lance even tells, you know, even hints that he believed, like ever since he met Gold or Ethan, or, you know, he envisioned that, you know, maybe we will see each other again one day, like implying that he is a trainer, he's a champion, but at the same time though, he is the, like, he'll see him again because he knows that he's got what it takes to reach him. You know, like like, you know, you study somebody's character long enough, you can definitely learn a lot about somebody. And, you know, Lance ends up fighting Ethan at one point and ends up getting, you know, Lance ends up losing to him. Imagine that. But it's like, you know, you really see how much different the series really, when you really like try to look for the answers, what do we see that we don't? And then the story uncovers itself in a more, I wouldn't say draconian, but it's like in a more civil matter rather. So it's interesting. Pokemon's definitely got that. It introduced a lot of questions that we slowly answer, and then with every question that's answered, 10 more questions pop up. So yeah, so that's cool. So again, I'll do the best I can to explain these videos, but what does this all have to do with Dragonites being over-leveled, basically? Well, it just goes to show you, you know, a lot of people really, you know, how many things changed in the series that we really don't see, that ultimately were there from the very beginning, whether due to time constraints or a form of balancing the game's gameplay features. I was going to say RPG features, but it's really the same thing. But anyway, so again, if you're not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. If I find something else, or if I find something that's worth talking about, I will make a video about it. So I hope this explains a lot. If you have any questions and requests, please ask. And until then, have a nice day, and we'll see you again.